I bid farewell to Washington as I set off for the Oregon coast. My first stop is the historic city of Astoria.
Oh wow, beautiful. We finally arrived in the historic town of Astoria, where our journey down the Oregon coast officially begins. Founded in 1811, Astoria is the oldest city in Oregon and the oldest American city west of the Rocky Mountains.
Situated at the mouth of the Columbia River, this strategic port city of 10,000 people is named after the great German-American entrepreneur and opium smuggler John Jacob Astor, who in the early 19th century founded a fur trade monopoly at Fort Astoria. In the late 1800s, the city saw a large influx of Nordic and Chinese immigrants, the former working the fisheries and the latter the canneries. Throughout its history, the region was contested over between the French, English, and Americans, and it was here where in the winter of 1805, Lewis and Clark concluded their famous expedition to the Louisiana Purchase. And in 1990, Arnold Schwarzenegger filmed his beloved movie, Kindergarten Cop. Today, Astoria holds the record for having the highest relative humidity in the contiguous United States, as well as being its cloudiest city, averaging just 125 days of sunshine. Although most of the original buildings were destroyed during the fires of 1883 and 1922, the city has still managed to preserve the vibe of a 19th century fishing town and is regarded as the most beautiful city in the Pacific Northwest. Talk to some of the locals, however, and you will hear a very different side of Astoria, one of death and restless spirits. Throughout its history, the town saw it all, from maritime warfare and catastrophes to battles between settlers and natives. And in the early 19th century, it was notorious for a practice known as shanghaiing. A man walking down the wrong street after dark could find himself forcibly working as a deckhand the next morning.
Behind me are the remains of Old Fort Astoria,
where the history of the American West began. In 1811, the fort served as the base for John Jacob Astor's fur trade monopoly, and natives came from as far as eastern Canada and the Hawaiian Islands. But the War of 1812 between the U.S. and Britain saw the collapse of the fort, which was too isolated to receive military aid. And by 1813, the Pacific Fur Company had sold all assets to the Montreal-based Northwest Company, who renamed the fort Fort George. Then, in 1821, it came under the control of the British Hudson Bay Company. And after being temporarily abandoned in 1825 and establishing Fort Vancouver, the fort was reoccupied from 1830 to 1848, during which time it was used for the company's seasonal salmon trade. The fort is also the birthplace of Ronald MacDonald, a teacher who introduced the English language to Japan at a time when foreigners could be killed for even stepping foot in the country.
Up behind me is the city's famous Liberty Theater.
Opened in 1825, the building quickly became a symbol of the city's rebirth, as its unique Italian Renaissance architecture made it stand out from the rest of the post-fire reconstructions. And back in the day, iconic names like Duke Ellington, Jack Benny, Guy Lombardo, and supposedly even Al Capone all hung out here.
I was thinking this is so
That's okay. That's okay. A to co?
Chcesz stanąć przy tym? To jest fajny taki slogan. Dajcie jeszcze zrobić.
And we seem to have stumbled upon some sort of Sunday morning market. I'm actually not sure if this is something that happens every weekend or if it's just something they do because there's some music festivals taking place this weekend, but still pretty cool. Lots of different variety of items. Ojczyzny coś? Maybe, yeah. This beautiful building behind me is the city's iconic Playable Mansion. It's considered by many to be the most beautiful building in all of Astoria. Built in 1884, this beautiful Queen Anne-style mansion served as the retirement home for Captain George Playable and his family until his death in 1920. His work as an entrepreneur and bar pilot made him Astoria's first millionaire. He was strongly revered for his integrity and support for the townspeople, and was regarded as something of a local hero for his efforts to rescue a sinking ship in 1852.
Any of the tickets up there in the house.
Okay. Well, that video, you guys want to watch?
It's one of the few buildings to be spared the Great Fire of 1922, only to be threatened by city developers. Now, while most of the fires that struck here pretty much devastated the entire downtown area, most of these homes that were built on top of the hill ended up surviving. Behind me is the city's iconic First Presbyterian Church, affectionately nicknamed the Big Yellow Church for obvious reason. It was actually constructed in 1903. This one combines elements of Queen Anne stick, European Gothic, and Italianate architectural style. And thanks to its hilltop location, it's one of only a few buildings actually survived the Great Fire of 1922. Ja, tu tam jest Valparaiso przypomina. This brick building you see behind me is the first United Methodist Church, and the first Methodist mission was actually founded in Astoria around 1840, and before the construction of this church in 1853, the services will actually be held inside log cabins belonging to the priests and other Methodists.
Czyli stajemy na koło.
A ten miał na 15.
No ale 15 tych stanów, za mokro. Ja byłem latem już drugi raz.
U nas taka szusza, że...
Zbudować z Kolumbia River do Kalifornii, nie do wody nie ma.
Beautiful building right there is the St. Mary's Star of the Sea Catholic Church. The congregation was founded in 1874.
Daj zrobić ci zdjęcie. Chcesz? I tu ci. Jak zimno.
Oh wow, this is cool. Behind me is the city's famous Astoria Column, the town's most famous landmark. Completed in 1926, this 125-foot high structure is dedicated to the founders of the Great Northern Railway. And the column contains these beautiful images depicting the entire history of Astoria.
Alright, let's get up there.
Oh wow, incredible view of the Youngs River right behind me here. Well, another spectacular view of the Columbia River right on the other side. That shoreline you see over there is actually Washington. And the two states are linked by the Astoria-Megler Bridge. Completed in 1966 and spanning a length of 4 miles, it is the longest truss bridge in North America. Okay, so check this out. Even in the most unexpected places, you can find wildlife if you know exactly what to look for. Do you see? How about now? Look at that. There's actually a slug right there. All scrunched up. A little garden slug. All over the place. Yeah, see, this is one of the few critters that actually prefer rainy weather. This strange looking guy right here is a banana slug. They're really common in temperate regions. They get their name from their yellowish color. And they're actually coated in a thick toxic slime. And if you get it on your fingers, it's really sticky and has a consistency like snot. Banana slug. From Astoria, it's just a short drive to the historic Fort Clatsop. This wooden structure behind me is a reconstruction of Fort Clatsop. This was the winter encampment of the Lewis and Clark expedition, who built it in just 3 weeks and stayed here from December 1805 to March 1806, before embarking on their long journey back to St. Louis to report their findings to Thomas Jefferson.
Over on this side are where the enlisted men stayed. On this side, first room down here was the Charbonneau family. The middle room was Lewis and Clark. And the room on this end was the orderly room where the sergeants lived. And behind that is the meat room or the storage room. No, they weren't. They might have a stool or something.
Not far, I guess. Yeah. And then that's no. That's my Mr. One.
And here's a statue of the famous Sacagawea who aided them in their expedition. I never knew she carried a baby with her. Before they left, they gifted the fort to the chief of the Clatsop Indians, but eventually it succumbed to the elements. So what we see today is a reconstruction.